Welcome to Drum Talk. And this week, it's getting closer to Christmas. I'm on some forums on Facebook about drums and vintage drums and cymbals. And I was on the Paiste vintage cymbals site yesterday, and I put up a picture of my kit. And one of the guys asked me a question: how do I like the big beat versus the giant beats? So I thought it was time to revisit some Paiste cymbals and some of these questions about what's the difference between the big beats, the giant beats, the 2002s, the 505s. Now, I got back into my Paiste cymbals because I never left being into Paiste cymbals. Always loved Paiste cymbals, but my first Paiste cymbal was a 505 16-inch crash. And over the years I would buy different cymbals of Paiste. And the 505s were one that I could afford early on. I had a rude set of hi-hats, which was the 2002 alloy. I still have them. But I never had a full set until 2015. That's when I really got a full set. Actually, I probably had a full set before 2015, but in actuality, I never considered it a full set until I got that 24-inch giant beat ride, which I may pull up in a little bit. But people ask, what's the difference between the giant beats, the big beats, the 2002s, the 505s versus the traditionals, or versus some of the other lines like the 602s or the signature line. Now, I almost wanted to get into the Paiste thing in the 90s because I had a good friend of mine. His name is Rich Sullivan, God rest his soul. Rich and I were great pals, and he got a kit, and he had the ability to get a set of Paiste signature cymbals with a full crash, 18-inch crash, and a thin china. And he had I think he had a full ride and a thin 17-inch crash and some splashes. It was some beautiful, beautiful cymbals. I thought the signature cymbals were great sounding cymbals, and I still do to this day. But they're made of that B15 alloy. And they had the glassy shimmer that the 2002s have, and all the B8 alloys. Because let's talk about alloy. What cymbals are made out of is going to affect how they sound. Paiste does B8 the best. There's no doubt about it. In my opinion, if you're looking for B8 alloy cymbals, Paiste invented the formulas. They created the concept. They make the best B8 cymbals. And the first ones were the giant beats. Okay? Now, what attracted me to Paiste, though, is that high-end shimmer. Their crashes always just kind of fit in the mix. The rides always kind of have a nice spot in the mix, but they're not Zildjian. They're not Sabian. They're not B20. When you think of B20, you think of the mysterious bronze, the mysterious secret formula, which is that B20 alloy with a little mixture of silver. I actually went to a Zildjian tour once at the Zildjian factory in Massachusetts when I was in Cape Cod with my family back in the 90s. And I took my son. And it was an awesome day. And the big trick that they were telling us was when Avidas Zildjian, the dad, would come in and he had some extra spare change in his pocket when they used to make silver dollars back in the day. He'd take his silver dollars and he'd throw it into the formula. And I'd add that little extra silver into the formula. And that was why the cymbals of the 60s and the 50s, Zildjian-wise, had a different kind of a vibe to them. And they were thinner rolled, of course, and the way they laid them was a little different, and they weren't as rock and roll as what they became in the 80s when they started getting their manufacturing techniques down. And they started making thicker cymbals for rock drummers. So that's why they're coveted to have Zildjian's 50s and 60s cymbals. They're coveted cymbals to have. Okay? And the formula probably wasn't as precise as what I got from that tour. Was they would just throw in a little silver, and that silver mixture would be different in different batches. Well, Paistes have always been perfectly designed cymbals. They've been cymbals designed for players, and they're made precisely and with that Swiss precision. Okay? So what's the difference between a big beat versus the giant beat? Well, I will tell you one thing. They're making thinner cymbals. And the thing that drew me to the giant beats are the giant beat cymbals are multi-cymbals. This is a multi-20. It's a thinner cymbal. It is actually the same weight almost as this 505 crash. Now, 505 hammering, 505 lathing. This is, of course, somewhere around 1980, this cymbal. This one, new vintage Giant Beat 20-inch multi. The gram weight difference is about 5 grams difference. I'm not sure which is heavier. I think it might be this one, just slightly. Okay? Crash. Slightly different tones for the 20s. Okay? But as a ride, this shimmers. And the 505 to me always sounded like I was riding on a crash cymbal. And that's the difference in those two cymbals. This is that B8 alloy, but the way they hammered it and the way they lathed it was not quite as the fine pinpoint lathing and hammering that they did on the Giant Beats. Now, bring us to the 2002s. The 2002s were always kind of like the 505s, but the expensive version of the 505s. Or we used to say the 505s were the poor man's 2002s. Okay? When Paiste came out with the 2002 Big Beats in 2016, what were they going for? Well, number one, they brought in the hammering patterns. It's pretty apparent to me. I've never talked to anybody from Paiste that told me that this is the way it is. And I do have a friend that used to be a Paiste rep now. And he's been to my studio and we've hung out a couple times and talked on the phone. But I didn't ask him the question about the Big Beats, but it's pretty apparent to me that the Big Beats have got the hammering of the 602 Modern Essentials, the Vinnie Colaiuta cymbals. So when I looked at this cymbal, it said it had the same kind of pattern of hammering, which was hand hammered with the lathing pattern of a B8 cymbal of a 2002, and it has a slight darkness to it. So when somebody asked me yesterday on the news group or on the Facebook group, what's the difference between Giant Beat and the Big Beat? The Big Beats are a little more complex. They're just a little more complex. They're a little darker. They got a little bit more complex spread. I like dark cymbals. I've always gravitated towards dark cymbals. That's why I have bought the Caropes. That's why I have the Sabian HHs. So these have always been my favorite go-to cymbals, have been dark B20 cymbals. So this is close to a dark B20 cymbal. Now, because the Giant Beats are thinner cymbals, they're a little darker too than your average Paiste 2002 22-inch ride. Okay? Because the Paiste 22-inch 2002 ride is about 3,000 grams, somewhere around that, right around that range. And when you look at the Big Beats, about 2,300 to 2,400 grams. The Giant Beats fall into that same range, okay, into the thinner cymbal range, which makes them slightly darker, and darker probably is equated to lower pitch. So I like lower pitch cymbals, so I like thinner cymbals. I like complex hammering methods on them. I don't want them to be so bright and punching through that they're so heavy that that weight is now attributed into that sound. So for me, 2002s is what I was after. Now let me just do a little aside about some of the other lines. I love the traditionals. Okay, traditionals are wonderful cymbals. But I noticed that the traditionals just don't last if they're thin. If you get the really thin ones and you hit them hard, they bend. Okay? Same thing with the Chinas. I have a 16-inch signature China. I bent the heck out of that cymbal. It's been in some of my videos. You've probably seen me talk about in other videos. Okay? I'm so impressed with this 2002 China type. That's my newest cymbal to my collection. I hit it hard. I don't think it's going to dent. There's something about the way the molecules come together in B8 alloy that they just don't seem like they dent. You might crack it. Okay, I'm not saying you can't crack these cymbals or hit them wrong. And that's a whole other lesson. How do you hit a cymbal? Glancing blow on a cymbal. But that's the key. So anyhow, that's my video. We'll talk about 2002s and Giant Beats and what makes it happy. I'll put some footage of me playing drums. I don't know if I beat the clock or not. If I didn't beat the clock, I'll be back here and make it a little longer. Otherwise, thanks for watching.